If you've ever taken a probiotic, eaten fermented food, and still felt like nothing really changed, you're not alone. The issue usually isn't that the wrong things are being tried, it's that they're often done in the wrong order. I'm Dan Martin, chef and nutritionist, and in this video, I want to slow things right down and explain prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics in the order that actually makes sense. Because once the order is clear, a lot of the confusion disappears. Let's start with probiotics. Probiotics are about adding bacteria to your gut. That includes both probiotic supplements and fermented foods. And supplements are where many people begin. That's understandable. They're easy to take, heavily marketed, and framed as adding good bacteria, which subtly suggests something is missing. They focus on big numbers, 20 billion CFU, 50 billion CFU, because bigger feels better. They use scientific strain names to signal precision, and they promise broad outcomes like supports digestion or gut balance, without explaining what actually needs to be in place for that to happen. So the logic feels sound. If digestion feels off, maybe more bacteria is the answer. But here's what often gets missed. Your gut already contains hundreds of established bacterial species living in a highly competitive ecosystem. When you swallow a probiotic capsule, most of those bacteria don't permanently move in. At best, they tend to have a temporary effect while you're taking them, and then fade once you stop. And if the diet is low in fiber, those bacteria don't have the fuel they need to thrive. We'll come back to why that matters later. Adding probiotics without changing what you eat is a bit like planting seeds in dry soil. It's not that the seeds are bad, they might even sprout briefly, but without water and nutrients, nothing really takes hold. That's why so many people say, I took probiotics for weeks and nothing really happened. It's not that the probiotics never work. They can genuinely be helpful in specific situations like after antibiotics or in certain clinical contexts under clinical guidance. But for general gut health, they're often trying to solve the problem at the wrong level. That's why probiotic supplements sit at the bottom of the list. Not useless, just unlikely to do much on their own. So what about fermented foods? Fermented foods also introduce bacteria to your gut. Things like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, and kombucha. I'm sure you've heard one of those before. They're still probiotics, but they behave differently from supplements. First, they tend to deliver lower, more varied doses of bacteria. Second, they come as part of a food matrix alongside organic acids, enzymes, and fermentation byproducts. And here's the important part that often gets misunderstood. The benefit of fermented foods isn't mainly about those bacteria permanently colonizing your gut. Most of them don't, and that's fine. A well-known 10-week Stanford study looked at people who gradually increased fermented food intake to around 6 servings per day. Over time, gut microbiome diversity increased, and markers of inflammation decreased. But interestingly, when researchers looked more closely, most of the bacteria that increased didn't come directly from fermented foods themselves. Instead, the fermented foods appear to shift the gut environment, allowing existing bacteria already present at low levels to expand and stabilize. So fermented foods don't rebuild the gut from scratch, they gently improve the conditions. That's why they sit above supplements on the priority list. And the key isn't large amounts. One big bowl of kimchi isn't going to fix you, it's regular exposure. A spoonful of sauerkraut with lunch, kefir with breakfast, miso soup a few times a week. That's what I personally do. But still, even fermented foods aren't the foundation. That comes next. Prebiotics. This is the part that matters most. Prebiotics are simply food for your gut bacteria, mostly fiber from vegetables, beans and lentils, whole grains, nuts and seeds, and also polyphenols from colorful plants, herbs and spices, which also support beneficial bacteria and gut lining health. This step is consistently underestimated, which becomes clear when you consider that nearly 95% of the US population doesn't meet recommended fiber intakes. Large-scale research, including data from the American Gut Project, shows that fiber intake and plant diversity are among the strongest predictors of a healthier, more diverse gut microbiome. What predicts gut health isn't supplements or specific probiotic strains, it's food patterns. And when fiber intake is low, nothing else works particularly well. Not probiotics, not fermented foods, not elaborate gut protocols. However, when gut bacteria are fed properly, they regulate themselves, strengthen the gut lining, and produce beneficial compounds naturally. Those compounds are called postbiotics, things like short-chain fatty acids that support gut integrity, immune signaling, and metabolic health. You'll sometimes see postbiotic supplements advertised. The research here is still early and highly context dependent. The key point is this. Postbiotics are an outcome, not a shortcut. They're what gut bacteria already produce when they're well fed. For many adults, a realistic long-term fiber target sits around 25 to 35 grams per day from a mix of sources. But timing matters. If your fiber intake is currently low, jumping straight to that amount can cause bloating and gas, so go slowly. A practical approach is to add around 5 grams per day, hold it for a week, and again increase it if tolerated. Another common mistake is trying that for a week or two and not seeing dramatic results and then just moving on. The thing is, the gut adapts gradually. One quick note, if you have a diagnosed condition like IBS or inflammatory bowel disease, this approach may need adjusting with professional guidance. This is general guidance, not medical advice, before you come at me in the comments. So let's put this in order. Start by feeding the bacteria you already have. Fiber first. Add fermented foods if you enjoy them and tolerate them. And only then consider a probiotic supplement if there's a clear reason and with clinical guidance. This order is often flipped, but when it's corrected, gut health tends to become calmer, cheaper, and far less confusing. If there's one takeaway, it's this. Feed what you already have there. If you want to see how this looks in everyday food, that's what this channel is about. Simple, repeatable recipes that genuinely support gut health. I'll see you in the next one.